Toilet paper. You use it. I use it. Sometimes even my children use it. The point is, toilet paper is everywhere. Almost everyone needs it. And so much of it still comes from actual forests, which is insane. And yet, so many people, 2 billion people actually, don't have access to even basic sanitation, much less readily available and recycled toilet paper. That's about 40% of the global population. 289,000 children under 5 die every year from diarrheal diseases caused by poor water and sanitation. That's almost 800 children per day, or 1 child every 2 minutes. That's also completely fucking unacceptable. So what can I do about toilet paper and sanitation? And can I do them at the same time? I'm your host, Quinn Emmett, and my guest today is Bernie Wiley. Bernie's the sustainability director at Who Gives a Crap, and oh boy, do I love this company. We go way back, as you'll hear in just a minute. Who Gives a Crap makes toilet paper and paper towels and poop bags and more out of recycled paper and bamboo, and they give 50% of their profits to help build toilets and improve sanitation in the developing world. And because of Bernie's relentless focus, they consider every step of the supply chain along the way, from water use to power use, all the way to last mile delivery. Bernie, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. My kids are just home from school and probably yelling at my wife about snacks, and yours are just taking off. So it's perfect. We've got the window. Bernie, I've got a 2-part question for you. And it sounds like it's one question, but it's 2. So you have to listen to the phrasing. Okay, part 1. Why do you have to do this job? So of everyone in the world who could be doing this work for Who Gives a Crap, the things you're doing, why does it have to be you? And second part, why do you have to do this work? So of all the ways that you, Bernie Wiley, could have answered the call, why do you have to do this?
Yeah, that's interesting. Why do I have to do this? I guess it's because it's such an important topic, right? Working in sustainability and looking at how businesses influence sustainability outcomes for our societies, right? So why do I have to do this? I feel like this position was just right for me. You know, there's plenty of other people that could do this work. Almost anyone that I can think of could do this work, right? In sustainability, it's not rocket science. It's actually most of it's logical.
Sure.
It's just how it comes together, right? And how people put it together and having the motivation to try to make change and to make things different. It's not hard to think that we could use something that's not sustainable, like plastic, to package goods, or we could use something that we could recycle, like paper. It's not really a difficult choice. It's
Sure.
just do the companies have the insight, the motivation, and the desire to actually make changes?
I think that's all totally fair. And first of all, I don't know if anybody could do your job. Let's give yourself some credit here. But I do appreciate your obviously very learned perspective at this point, which is we know 90% of the things we need to do. It is not rocket science. There's some rocket science type stuff we need to figure out, clean steel, all that kind of shit. Sure, fine. It's on the margins. The most of the stuff we need to do and the companies can and need to do, it's pretty straightforward. It's not simple, but it's straightforward. Like you said, it's the logistics and it's the insight and it's often the political will inside the company to get these sort of things done. So I want to tell you a quick story before we get going, because I'm looking this up here. My first order from Who Gives a Crap was September 14th, 2019. So a long time ago, but now I have to tell you this story. So I get it. I'm really excited. Again, my kids are small. There's so much toilet paper in our house. Everything is, it's chaos. And my wife she works in Hollywood, and I was doing some side work there when we were living in Los Angeles. And, you have various representatives, if you're working agents or managers or whoever, and they've all got assistants and all that stuff. And the smart thing to do at the holidays is to give everyone some sort of gift, right? It's, a nice food or a basket or whatever it might be. Well, I decided in December 2019, I was going to give everyone an enormous box of toilet paper from Who Gives a Crap. So all of my agency, these fancy agencies, managers, lawyers, and all their assistants walked into work, I don't know, December, whatever, 10th, 2019. I probably have the order in here. And I mean, there must have been 30 people I sent this to. They all get to their desk or their office or their cubicle to an enormous cardboard box. And on the side, it probably says, "Who gives a crap?" And they're like, "What is happening?" And then I get all these emails and I'm just cackling and they're going, "What is this?" I'm like, it's toilet paper. It's bamboo. It's fantastic. You're welcome. And they're like, "Okay, holy shit, man. Like you could have just sent like some snacks or something." Well, let me tell you something, Bernie. That was December 2019. 3 months later, world ran out of fucking toilet paper. And let me tell you how many emails I got from my friends going, "Holy shit, I'm so glad I have this huge box." People, I was like, yes, nailed it. So that's how far I go back with Who Gives a Crap. I have been on a probably subscription since then, moved across the country. So that's it.
Well, thank you for being a long-term customer. We really appreciate that. And we often hear stories about people giving a roll of toilet paper to someone at Christmas time, and that was actually one of the ways I got introduced. But you gave a whole box.
No. We're not doing rolls here. I wanted the effect. I wanted the show of people walking in and going, "What is this?" First, a box, much less that says "Who gives a crap," and then for them to discover it's bamboo toilet paper. So I was pretty happy with that. I couldn't have planned the pandemic part, but you take what you can get. Bernie, you came to a company that was already explicitly doing work to improve its footprint, right? Per se, of this wildly destructive, but like we talked about with kids, inarguably necessary, tangible commodity, toilet paper, right? It is a very real problem because of its scale. Every single one of us needs it. And because, in North America, so much is pulled from old growth forests, which seems completely insane. But here we are. You showed up and said, "We need to do more than that." Talk to me about how you went from, warehouse and work on climate to throwing solar panels on the roofs.
Yeah, so I've spent most of my working life working in supply chains. And as you mentioned, that was everything from working on warehouse floors, picking, packing orders and forklifts to all the way through to management and control, processes, efficiencies and all sorts of things throughout the supply chain. And that landed me into management roles in businesses. But what I've found is working in supply chains is that there's so much waste. Supply chain is all about trying to reduce waste a lot of the time, but often decisions are made without consideration for the environment and without consideration for efficiencies. They're based on bottom line and based on dollar only. So after an amount of time, 10 years or so of working in supply chains and not being able to sort of make the change that I wanted to, I decided that I didn't really want to work for companies that weren't aligned with my values anymore and ended up making the move into companies that were. So I've been with Who Gives a Crap for 7 years now, just on 7 years. And most of that time has been working in supply chain, but I was working on projects in supply chain that were actively making a difference, right? Actively making a difference from a sustainability perspective. So whether that was reducing the amount of kilometers or miles for that final mile delivery, whether that's changing where our warehouse locations were, whether that was, getting renewable energy installed at warehouse locations or at factories, I was working on those kind of projects while I was working in sustainability. So when the opportunity came up to join the sustainability team full time, I took that opportunity. There's 2 of us in the team, but Who Gives a Crap now? And, that makes a huge difference to the way we view sustainability within the business and the actions that we can take. Fortunately for me, one of the core pillars of the business is sustainability.
I was going to say, you said 2 people are in the group, but really, that's for the specific formality. Everything is built around that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So there's 2 of us that work full time on sustainability, but we're working with everyone else in the business to make sustainable choices in everything that we do. So, the business is built on the 2 core pillars, one of sustainability and the other one of donation, right? So we donate 50% of our profits to non-government organizations around the world that build water and hygiene or WASH, we call it, WASH programs for people around the world who need it. So fortunately, I'm at a business that has sustainability at its core pillar, and I don't need to convince the leadership that we need to be sustainable. They're already of that mindset, and it's more about how do we enact and how do we ensure that everything we do is as sustainable as possible along the way.
So I don't want to put a pin in having to convince leadership of more and more in a wider variety of sustainability programs and efforts and things like that? Because I imagine there is still some. It is still a hugely logistical company, and it's complicated and all
Yep.
this, and you got to donate half your profits and all this stuff. I want to come back to though your history, because again, so many people listen to this show, which again we call it the most important question, which is what can I do? And it's people who run university endowments, it's bartenders, it's people in marketing, logistics, like artists, you name it, who are going either what more can I do in my community because I already do it at work, or how can I convince my own work or make a lateral move, whatever it is. I come back to one of my first jobs was at the Financial Times in London, and I remember walking in one day and the editor in chief had been sacked and there was a new one, and people were excited because this guy had worked in a lot of different pieces of the newsroom, so he could really speak to a lot of the different pieces of what needed to happen with the business. He really understood it when he was talking to someone in news or even sports at the FT, which was weird, and we axed most of it because that's not what they do. But he had that knowledge. He had a bit of a leg to stand on, as they say. You really, for someone who's like, I want to push all these sustainability efforts, I want to formalize this role within a company that's already trying to do so much of this and expand your warehouses and all that. It seems like you really had a leg up because, again, like you really understood. I mean, the ridiculous comparison, right? Of course, is like Tim Cook at Apple, who's like, I know this top to bottom, right? I'm not the marketing guy, but I know this top to bottom. That's got to be a strength.
Yeah, I think it is a real strength. So we know that 98+% of our emissions come from our supply chain, right? We're a brand. We don't own or operate the warehouses. We don't own or operate the manufacturing facilities. We buy them from partners that we work with, So we're a brand. Our emissions, as I said, come from our supply chain. So intimately knowing that supply chain, how it works and what happens in there is a huge leg up to be able to drive the sustainability initiatives. And just knowing where our emissions come from makes a huge difference. So, when we're talking about how to make changes and what to make change, it really is on the action side for our business deep in that supply chain where we can really make the differences.
It's interesting because even in here at 2025, it seems like however we stand politically, wherever we may be, so many businesses have at least been told they need to or have attempted to understand their supply chains and their emissions in scope 1, 2, and 3 and all of that, whether they're, going to be a fee on it or whatever it may be. And it's not always easy if you've never really had to consider that from the start. But like you said, you guys were sort of founded on that, even though you're not owning and operating these pieces. Did you feel like you had a good start on that? Were there any question marks? Were there any surprises where you said, oh, that's interesting, we have to try to accommodate for that? Or are there places that were obvious for improving on?
Some of it's obvious, some of it's not. So to really understand our emissions profile and where it's coming from, we engaged a consultancy to do a life cycle assessment on our tissue products.
Okay.
So what that involves is the consultancy looked at our whole supply chain. They researched a whole lot of peer-reviewed documents or other life cycle assessments, and they looked at everything from the growth of the raw materials used in our products all the way through to the end of life consideration for where our products are used. So when we think about that, that's called a cradle to grave assessment for what was done. That really highlighted exactly where our issues were when we're looking at particularly carbon emissions, but also highlighted where our issues were around water usage. There's a lot of water usage in paper making as well. And that really helped us to understand where the big hitters were. And we understand that it's in the manufacturing of the paper. For us, there's more than 50% of our emission profile is in the manufacture. So that's either converting a used paper, so recycled consumer grade paper, so things like textbooks and notebooks and etc., converting that into toilet paper, or it's from the conversion of bamboo into paper. So the actual pulping, the processing, and then actually conversion into the finished product. That's where most of our emissions sit. So that's our biggest opportunity. Our second biggest opportunity really is in the logistics, the movement of the goods from the manufacturing facility all the way to the consumer or the retailer. So that opened our eyes up. What we didn't really understand so well was the end of life and the raw material considerations, right? Like they actually make up a big piece of the puzzle as well. And they're not something that you have as much control over, but they
No.
are things that you need to be able to work on and to understand what happens to your product, particularly at the end of life, which is something that you do have a little more control over.
Did you all struggle? Because scope three, the end of life stuff, is where a lot of companies, I think, superficially, understandably, I empathize where they're like, this is like, we have no idea, like even something as intentional as toilet paper, right? Whether it's, your IKEAs or your Apples or whoever it may be, these things are just profound scale. But we do have to take responsibility, we do have to at least understand them. So talk to me about what that process was like for you all, because again, this is the thing I think that most places are going to struggle with, if not already. And it's why we've seen, so many carbon taxes and deal with scope three is left out or whatever it may be. This is the hard part. So you would think it would be easier for you all, but maybe not as much.
Yeah. So when we think about end of life, we're thinking about the whole product and its packaging, right? We're thinking about everything. So we know where most of our product ends up. It ends up in sewage treatment facilities. We sell into the US, UK, and Australia predominantly, some into Europe, right? We're selling into developed countries that have proper sewer systems and have sewage treatment systems. So most of our product either ends up in a sewage treatment plant or potentially in a septic system for people who are maybe not connected. So we understand where that product goes and we know what happens with it. And we understand that it does have an impact at the end of life. So our product, as you could imagine, it's not really circular. We don't want it to be, right?
Right.
It goes,
Of all the donut economics, this is the end of life on this one. No, thank you.
That's right. We know that this product ends up as waste at the end of its life. So we don't really control that, but we know what happens to it. So we can design a product to make sure that it does break down efficiently. It does biodegrade efficiently at its end of life. What we can do is really focus on our packaging, though, makes a difference, right? So that's where we can add some circularity in. So using 100% recycled paper to manufacture the corrugate that the goods are shipped in, using bamboo to manufacture the wrappers that wrap the actual
Love
paper.
the wrappers.
So all of those parts can then be part of that circular economy and go back into making more corrugate boxes, or they can go back into the paper making process, etc. So we have a really big focus on end of life and what happens at the end of life of our products. And it is a lot easier in our industry than something like a piece of IT equipment, for example.
Sure. I mean, you can argue that my IKEA Billy shelves should keep seeing different lives, and obviously they might fall apart and someone down the hall can use them, this and that. Again, in the world of sort of so much of this is control what you can control, it was very obvious to you all that there was an actual end of life for this product. But again, that doesn't mean you can't affect it in some way. And like you said, make it more biodegradable. Look at, okay, if we have chosen to do recycled stuff and we have chosen to do bamboo, at least for the TP to start, how biodegradable can they be? And then again, like that's more production possibly. What does that mean to weigh out the water and the power and all that?
Absolutely. And that's a big consideration. We're trying not to drive consumerism. We're trying not to drive people to buy more product. What we're asking people to do is to switch a product, right? So there's an amount of toilet paper that gets used in the world.
Wait, do you know that number?
No, I don't know exactly. It's a crap load though.
Nice.
We're asking people to change. We're not asking them to do something different. Just change what you're using to make an environmental difference, right? We're not trying to grow the amount of sales of toilet paper in the world.
Right.
We're also trying to influence other companies in the world to use sustainably sourced fibers for their production as well. So that's really our goal, is not to drive the additional use of a product, but to switch the use. And then also to drive the sustainability of the manufacture of that product.
Were you ever, your children are older than mine now, but when they were first starting to wipe themselves, were you ever horrified by how much toilet paper they used, considering you were trying to cut down on consumption?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. But I've been working for this company for some time now. And for most of that time, I've got a lot of toilet paper in this house usually.
Just sometimes I'm in there, I'm like, well, of course the toilet's clogged. Look at, what are you doing? That's a whole roll. And I can hear them because of your paper wrappers. Every time I hear them opening them, I'm like, there's no reason they need to open a new one every day. It's crazy. Monsters. Or they don't wipe it off. That's a totally different discussion. I want to come back to that second part where you said it's not much of a I don't want to put words in your mouth. It wasn't too difficult to convince leadership to do some of these other efforts, right? Clean energy, less water, using EVs. Change is hard, even if it would seem obvious with the mission of your company. How do you all, and in your arguments in this formal role, prioritize the company's original goals with this wider band of more widely applicable sustainability efforts?
That is such a great question. And that is something we wrestle with all the time. And while it might not be hard to convince leadership that we can do things better and we can do things more sustainably, the actual actions can be hard to get across sometimes, to get agreement on. So when we think, I'd like to use an example, if I can, of
By all
thinking
means.
about EVs. So we have launched a fleet of EVs here in Australia. We did that off the back of launching a fleet of vehicles that were dedicated to delivering our own goods. So that was almost a no-brainer. We were able to contract a company that could turn up at our warehouses with a vehicle, load it full of our goods, and only deliver our goods for the day. Now, the benefit of that is we could measure and reduce the amount of road miles for that final mile delivery. We could also reduce the cost for our delivery. Now, the alternative to that is that someone like, a FedEx or someone like that turns up, picks up your goods and mixes them in a truck with a whole lot of other companies' goods, and then they go out and deliver. There's pros and cons of each approach, but for us, we have the volume and scale here in Australia to be able to do that with a dedicated fleet. So that was almost a no-brainer. The win there is reduced miles on the road, which is reduced emissions and reduced costs. That's a win. There's no
Sure.
one in a business
Yeah.
that's going to sign off on that, right? When we wanted to change some of those dedicated vehicles from diesel to EV, though, there's a cost, and it's going to cost us more to deliver. So when you factor in that cost and you say, well, there's dollars extra to deliver using an EV, even though we know it's a better mode of transport and produces less emissions, it also reduces our donation, because anything extra that we spend comes off our bottom line, comes off our donation. So there's a tension there, right? What are we trying to do here? What's our best course of action? Is it to help supply people with water, hygiene, and sanitation? Or is it better to reduce our emissions? And that's a really tough question.
It
right?
almost becomes
And it's a big
harder
one.
for you all than another company, right? Who's just a capitalist monster.
I would say so. Yeah. I mean, we've got to fund our business and fund sanitation and hygiene.
Sure.
And we pride ourselves on the amount of donation that we can make. So we're always trying to reduce costs within our business, whether that, any kind of cost, whether that's an operational cost or a capital expense. So keeping those costs down makes the biggest difference. So often when you're looking at something and saying, can I please spend some money on something for sustainability? It's looked at very closely and
Sure.
considered very carefully before that decision is given a yes or a no.
Right. That is that third rail. I want to talk about, I don't really have much specifically prepared here, but it's always top of mind. I'm trying to talk about it more, both with my own children and locally, nationally, globally, about your water usage. Can you tell me what logistically, sort of soup to nuts, that your company is actually responsible for, that you have your hands on? What is the water usage like? How do you all consider that in it all? Where do you see opportunities to reduce it or recycle it?
Yeah. Look, that's a really great question. I don't have the figures on the exact amount of
I'll need
of
figures.
liters or
Yeah.
gigaliters that we use, but water is used all the way through the paper manufacturing process, particularly in the pulping process. Now, there's a couple of things that we consider. One is where we manufacture, right? So where are these goods manufactured, and is enough water in that area, or is that area in water stress? That's number one. Number two is how much water gets used during the process and consumed. So we're trying to provide clean drinking water to people around the world. But we're manufacturing a product that uses a lot of water, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one thing we don't want to do is use water from water stressed areas, and we don't want to pollute water. So the next thing we look at with our manufacturers is how much of that water gets reused back into their systems and how much of it gets discharged. And then when it's discharged, or if it is discharged, what's the quality of that water like? And what's the environmental impact? So one of the key things that we do is we don't use traditional bleaching processes for our toilet paper, right? Everyone wants white toilet paper. When you pulp paper, it doesn't come out beautiful and white like that.
Mm.
comes out more of a, maybe a coffee or a beige color, right? We know, and we've seen this through consumer usage. People generally don't want a toilet paper that's an off-white color, or they want a really crisp, clean white color. It's consumer preference. There's no real need for it. It's just what people are used to. And we've seen other companies put products on the shelf that are unbleached, and they still sell, but it's just not the same. And for us to have the impact, we need to have a product that people want to buy.
Right. Otherwise, you're not donating anything to anybody.
That's right. So we need to continue to grow our business by selling products that people want to buy. So what I'm saying here in a roundabout way is that we look very closely at the bleaching processes that we use. We use an elemental chlorine-free or a process chlorine-free bleaching process, just depending on the type of paper. We use either one. And what that helps to do is reduce the environmental impacts that bleaching has on water quality and discharged water from those facilities.
Okay. Yeah. It's, again, I try to put myself in my children's feet or talking to people who are, the first sustainability officer at a company, whatever it might be. It can feel a lot when you start to pull the string on what are we exposed to? What are the externalities of our business? Whether you're just even just an internet brand, much less a brand like yours. And then there's obviously the wholly owned and operated side of things. But it's really easy to start pulling the string on the sweater and be like, oh, fuck, now I got to fix this. Like, oh, shit, man. But that's it. And we haven't done that math, which is why we're here, right? So it's incumbent, and it's so fascinating to see companies like yours really wrestle with these things and go, yeah, but we can't just pay for it or else we're not, building water supplies. Like, it really has to fit. You arguably have a more difficult journey.
I think that analogy of pulling the string on the sweater is really important. Very few things in this world, consumer goods, whatever it might be, are perfect from a sustainability perspective. Everything has an impact. Everything that we do has an impact. It's just how that impact plays out and how we manage the risks or the outcomes from that impact as well, right? So us having this conversation, there's a lot of energy, a lot of electricity being used in servers and things around the world making this happen. Can that be done sustainably? Yeah, it can be, but it's not as easy as doing it unsustainably, right? And when you kind of just keep unpicking things, you realize that nothing or very few things are really perfect, but we can always do better. Just because something's not perfect doesn't mean you can't do better. And just because something's not perfect doesn't mean that it should be criticized. It can be better than the alternative without being perfect. And that's a step in the right direction. We don't solve climate change. We don't solve sustainability issues tomorrow with, simple decisions.
Right.
It's a journey, and it's going to take a long time, and it's going to take a collective effort.
I admire your nuance there because I so often veer between every incremental step matters in all of these different things. And then in the middle, it's where can we multi-solve? So we build a lot in our app around co-benefits, which is, look, my favorite example is electric school buses, right? Yes, they will cost you, and they will all, at least for now, cost more to run, and you have to build the charging infrastructure, all that. Cleaner air inside the bus for the kids and the driver, which means kids are doing better in school, which means drivers are coming to work, which means, all these different things. You can measure a lot of that stuff, but it's complicated. And then on the other hand, I have I don't want to say like Batman level vigilantism where I try to make pretty black and white or simple, as you would put it. But there's some things that just, make me angry. And I just, air pollution and kids with asthma and stuff like that. I just go, oh, well, I don't care. But toilet paper is a great example. And I know you guys aren't just doing toilet paper now, but toilet paper is a great example because you do have this leg to stand on where you get to go to people and go, hey, you need this. So do I. Like that. We can move past this. This isn't one of those, you don't need a new t-shirt type of things. You need it. It's consumable. It has a real end of life to it. And it's not being done well. Often it's being done horribly. So any steps we can take both for ourselves to scale so we can contribute more, but also, like you said, as a template, right? For some of these other companies, whether they're startups or these enormous ones, any of that's measurable and transferable can go such a long way, even if it's quote unquote incremental.
Yeah, absolutely. And we all have choices in our lives that we make when we're buying products, choices on how we might travel. And often those things, I think, pass us by in our daily life. It might be that we buy the brand that we like just because we really like that brand without the consideration for the environmental impact. It might be that we don't have a choice. We can't necessarily afford to do something different than we're currently doing. But we all have these choices in our lives about how we do things, and the small things do add up. I know they might seem insignificant at the time, but it's that collective action and it's the many small pieces of the puzzle that do add up to helping to solve the problem rather than, being part of the problem. And I really do encourage people just to think about that and to think about how do you make a sustainable choice in most of the things you do in your life? What are those small things that you can do to make
Yeah.
a sustainable choice? That kind of thinking embeds in the way that you work and the way that you think and move through your life, but it also does then have impacts on the environment around us.
It does in so many ways. I mean, we have learned, especially in the past 5 years, we knew, but we have learned like we are a very social species. And whatever your choice, driving an EV, solar panels, compost, all these different things, right? A heat pump versus a furnace, all these different choices you can make. We are social. Someone will come to your house and you don't have to send them a box of toilet paper to their office, but at the same time, they'll come to your house and go, what is this crazy toilet paper with the Christmas decorations on it? And you go, ha, now I've got you cornered. And you can tell them and they might go and do that. So you bring in this consultancy, you do this big examination of your whole cradle to grave, which I'm pretty sure is how my children consider me at this point, cradle to grave assessment of everything. Here's what we can affect from the pulping to the water, to the EVs, to the last mile. And then someone at the company says, you know what we should do? Paper towels and trash bags. What was transferable to those new product lines that you're also trying to improve?
Yeah, the paper towels were a relatively easy one for us. It's the same process as
Sure.
making the toilet paper, just got a different finish on it. So
Yeah.
that one was relatively easy. The garbage bags and pet waste bags, they were a different story.
The first time I got the email about those, I was like, oh, well, that looks hard. So tell me a little bit about that. Because again, everyone uses them. Everyone uses them at home, at school, at work, whatever it is. They're a nightmare. Tell me.
So we have spent such a long period of time trying to make sure that our supply chain has as little plastic in it as possible,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Particularly single-use plastic. And we've done a pretty good job of it, if I do say so. To then have someone say, hey, we're going to do garbage bags. It was like, what? We're introducing plastic. But there was a reason for it, right? We talked to our customers and we understood what our customers want from us. We've always planned diverge from just paper-based products and to grow our product range. And we understood that one of our biggest opportunities and one of the best things that our customers wanted was a sustainable way to deal with their garbage.
Mhm.
So this was not just a seed of an idea from someone in the business to say we should just do garbage bags. This is through consumer research and understanding what our customers were looking for. And, we consider our customers to either kind of be eco warriors or eco curious. We have lots of different kinds of customers, but a lot of them are very focused on the eco side of our business. So we want to try to make products that work for them and that they want and they need. That started off a long process of what type of garbage bag would we make? What would we make it from? We looked at so many different options from the different types of plastics, like as raw plastic. We looked at plant-based plastics. We looked at alternatives to plastic. We looked at all different kinds of things. And where we came in the end from a environmental perspective, as far as the amount of energy used to create the product and the end of life, which we talked about earlier, of the product and trying to ensure that we're not introducing more single-use plastic to the world, was to use 100% recycled plastic. That was the best way. When we arrived there, we went, this really mirrors what we're doing with paper. We're taking secondhand paper, we're turning it back into a new product that ends up being a single-use product at the end of its life. So once we sort of arrived at that conclusion, we're like, this isn't really that different to what we're currently doing. And hopefully we're going to help improve the environmental outcomes from the use of that plastic, even though it is, as I said, at the end of its life, it's going to end up in landfill. It's single use. It's not going to be a circular product.
You're like, oh, we have eco-curious, eco-warriors, and then crazy people like me. You have to get yourself over that hump of, we're building a supply chain out of plastic. This is what we're like, how could we how dare you? Like, how could we do this? You have to take that step back and go, The rest of it is a nightmare. It's whenever somebody says, oh, you got to get these new garbage bags. They don't leak, right? And there's trade-offs there. It's, oh, you got to get these shoes. They're or coats or whatever it might be, or these pants, that are stretchy and water repellent. And it goes, there's some trade-offs there, it's probably not great. But in your case, again, like the alternatives are so not great. And well, two things, and I'm really curious here. There's this theoretically enormous cache of plastic to pull from for recyclable. But at the same time, we've really learned in the past few years, especially in the US, where China stopped taking our plastic a few years back, there's a lot of plastic that is not really recyclable, if not most of what we use here. So how did you guys go down that process of, okay, we're going to use it, we're going to use recycle, but what can we use and what makes a good garbage bag?
Yeah, so for us, that was really about finding the right supplier. So as I said earlier, we don't own or operate in, any of
Right.
our manufacturing facilities, but we went out and found the best possible supplier that we could, who could help us understand about plastic and recycling plastic, but could also guide us in the best ways to do that. So our garbage bags are actually made in Europe. We use one factory in Europe. We would love to be able to manufacture them domestically in each market we operate in, but that's not an option just yet. Why we chose this manufacturer is that they source their plastic from local companies. So this is post-business waste really, but generally what it is, what for most of the time is the plastic that's used to wrap pallets for transportation.
Oh,
So
yeah, sure.
when you
sure.
see goods being loaded onto the back of a vehicle for transportation, they're usually wrapped in a plastic or a stretch film that's then cut off. It's a single-use product. It's used for safety, and it's a really great product for what it does, right? I just want to be clear on plastic. Plastic is an amazing substance. It's just not so great when you throw it in there.
Oh, I mean, it's the same. You can look at the Industrial Revolution and be like, look at us. We're not in the trees anymore, but at the same time, we've got some things to fix.
So where this supplier takes plastic from retailers, from warehouses, from other businesses within its area, and then it uses a mechanical process to break that plastic down into smaller pieces and then remakes it into new plastic products like plastic bags. So they're able to do that with using 100% recycled plastic. So there's no virgin material going into it whatsoever. They're able to do that with a local supply chain to supply those goods, the raw materials. As you said, China stopped being kind of trash can of the world and taking all the rubbish and recycling it, and that's okay. But hopefully that will help to develop systems within our countries that we live in to better recycle these plastic goods. Yeah, so our manufacturer also runs on not quite 100% renewable energy, but they do use a very high mix of renewable energy. They have their own on-site solar, etc., to help run their facility as well. So we took all of those environmental considerations into play when deciding where and how and what we were going to make this product from. And as I said, it's very similar to our paper goods in its kind of transition. It was a product, it got recycled, it got turned into something that's single use. And then we had a strong consideration for its end of life and what happens with that product at its end of life.
Are there models of what they do that now you're looking for in other continents? Like you said, the urge to try to do that more domestically in the US and the UK and Australia?
Absolutely. Yes. And to help try to kickstart those industries here. So, in Australia, it's something like, I don't know, 9 to 12% of our plastic gets recycled. And those types of soft plastics, which make the garbage bags that we use, it's way less. It's, really such a small amount of that plastic actually gets recycled here. And we're actively working with potential suppliers here and in other countries that could do that for us. There are some strong challenges though. When you think about the Western world, as Australians, we generally earn a lot of money, right? For the work that we do. We're a rich nation.
Sure.
And wages come into that, costs of doing business in a Western country, energy costs, all kinds of different things factor into that end cost of goods. And at the moment, we haven't found a viable option in Australia to be able to make those products, or in the US for that matter, to make those products locally.
Well, the best thing you can do is really try to understand what's the most measurable and transferable from what they do. And you can't replicate it exactly, but like you said, hopefully you can build up that industry. And again, I have always hoped these past, 5-6 years that this China decision would get the rest of us to get it together, whether it's just in use or how we reuse these things or what it might be. Because like you said, look, Patagonia is not going to argue with you that plastic isn't amazing. I mean, all these, they try to use 100% recycled wherever they can. But you're not going to get these shells that you can go climbing in or weather storms in on some boat in the middle of the ocean without some of these materials. They just say we try everywhere we can. And I remember a few years ago they had a pretty interesting campaign about, we're not there yet. We're trying to crack something and like we haven't figured it out. And we're just going to tell everybody about that. It wasn't the don't buy our stuff, which is always great, but it was a like, this is harder than we thought, which you always appreciate. Again, like however much nuances to it is like, we're struggling with this. And it's like, if they are, then, I can't imagine for everybody else.
Yeah, absolutely. And, there's been a lot of companies, and it's been very public recently, companies maybe walking back their sustainability pledges, for example. And that's often seen negatively, but I think, being realistic instead of having a goal that's unachievable is probably a better thing for the environment and a better thing for these companies to adhere to. If there was a company out there that was aiming to be net zero by 2040, which there were quite a lot of companies, and they're now saying, hey, this is much harder than we expected it to be.
Yeah.
We should be able to do this by 2050. That's much better than getting to 2040 and just throwing your hands in the air and saying we didn't make it.
Right. We bought a bunch of carbon offsets and they're not real.
Yeah. So I think we need to stop beating up companies that are trying to do ambitious things and maybe not making it. Maybe they're failing, or maybe they're only getting partway there, right? But hey, they were ambitious and they were trying to make something happen in the first place. Give them a break. Let them reset. Let them try to do something better. Unless, of course, they're completely walking back everything.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's plenty of ones where, again, literally just buying the offsets, or they're walking it back entirely for no reason. But again, I had this struggle, and it's funny, when I first thought of you guys outside of my own bathroom, for a long time, we didn't take any advertising because everything was plastic, or for a while it was crypto or whatever, whatever it could have been. I was like, I can't. Like, we stand on the integrity of our work, and my audience would have been like, nope, we're out of here. But what's occurred to me in the past couple of years, and what we're trying to do now, is really go on the other hand, it actually behooves us to work with the companies that are trying to do the right thing in a lot of these, again, essential things that we need, whether it's cleaning products or clothing, textiles, or toilet paper, or whatever it might be, where you're going like, you're gonna buy this anyway because you have to, or shoes, again, things like that. It behooves us because that's actually exactly what our audience is looking for. And no one is doing this perfectly. It is almost impossible, but the more we're throwing at it, the more we can be realistic and share those stories and share those difficulties. That's how we start to actually move the needle on a lot of this.
Yeah, absolutely. I just like to always use the analogy that things aren't clear cut, and they're not everything's black and white. You can't just pick one side of an argument and stay on that side of an argument forever, right? It's just not that, right? Things are nuanced. Issues, and particularly around sustainability and climate, they're going to take time. They evolve. They take time to get the thinking through. They get time to get the action right. And just because we can't be 100% sustainable in everything we do today, it doesn't mean we can't be better tomorrow.
100%. I mean, I'd love to spend all day on it, but I know this isn't your side of the work. But let's just speak briefly about the philanthropic side, about the giving, and sort of how you identify projects, any mistakes where you guys feel like you've had to sort of pivot, best practices you've learned, things like that. Because again, it's very admirable, but we've seen a lot of versions of things like this where people have gone, oh, it turns out they weren't giving as many shoes or eyeglasses or whatever it may have been. So talk to me about this.
Yeah, fortunately, we've got an amazing person, Robin, who runs that side of the business for us. And there's a few things that we've learned along the way and a few things that we do. So we're very particular about the organizations we work with. Mm-hmm. We don't just work with anyone. Mm-hmm. We're particular about that because we want to ensure that those organizations are putting in place long-term solutions for the communities that they're servicing. There are any number of case studies of water projects and hygiene projects that have gone on around the world that have been implemented, thousands of dollars spent to build infrastructure or whatever it is, only for 2 years later for those pieces of infrastructure to not be working. and have no support there to get them back up to standard or to use them. Right. So this kind of area is littered with failures, I guess. And
Oh, yeah.
we tried to learn as much as possible from those. So we only work with non-governmental organizations who provide sanitation and provide the services ongoing to manage that, or they provide the education to the community to be able to manage that themselves. So they have to be long-term ongoing solutions. So that's kind of the first thing. We're very particular about who we work with and why we work with them. We practice, we call it non-restricted funding, right? So we don't decide what projects get funded and which ones don't. We decide the partners we work with, and we let them to decide what to do with the money that we give to them.
That's their job.
So instead of telling them, hey, we're going to give you $1 million and you need to build X amount of toilets with that, that's not how we do it. They tell us what they would do with $1 million, and then we let them do that if that's what they think is the best thing to do, and it provides long-term solutions. One of the considerations, and this is just like a little bit of a sidestep, but is underserviced communities. So the way that you can service the most people is to go into a densely populated area and provide services inside that densely populated area, right? But that might leave rural communities further outside of that area who are maybe more in need of that service for water and sanitation. That may leave them underserviced. So we don't specify the amount of people or that needs to be impacted by the donation or what we're giving. We just want to ensure that people who are impacted by it have a long-term viable solution for water and sanitation.
I appreciate the self-awareness. There's not a lot. Some of my job is, again, helping people answer this question, what can I do? Or cities or companies, whatever size, people who run investments or have $2, and a lot of wealthier folks or businesses or both want to start their own thing and go, I'll go do this better here. Let me go impact this thing. And my argument is virtually always, please don't do that. There's a lot of, missteps. Like you said, there's so many case studies and examples ongoing of health and water infrastructure or disaster relief. And then the grants run out or they pull out or no one has been trained to take care of this thing, whatever it might be. Refrigeration's great. And then there aren't any parts to repair it over and over. Totally. But there's some amazing organizations that are very local that really know what they're doing. And the smartest thing you can do with your money is often to let them do their job. And I really appreciate that that's your company's perspective on it, because it really empowers those folks, I would hope.
Yeah, thank you. We don't know how to build toilets. I shouldn't say we don't know how to. That's not our expertise.
Yeah.
That's not what we do.
No, just because you've moved into trash bags doesn't mean you figured out how to build toilets, bud.
Exactly. I think just one little thing I'd like to add to that as well is that these organizations are crying out for funding at the moment, right? They've got programs in place. Yeah. They know what they're doing. They know what they want to do. They have to be able to fund it and drive it. And they're really crying out for that funding at the moment. There is a lack of funding going on. So I would encourage, as you said, for people, organizations or businesses, whatever it is, if you can help fund the non-government organizations that are delivering services to people, that is a huge, huge requirement at this point in time.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And are there inefficiencies in a lot of these enormous bureaucracies and struggles? Of course, but find me an industry or a sector that doesn't have them, that can't be improved on. Show me your industry and we could talk. But that doesn't mean they're not doing often incredibly vital work. And again, that work to identify like who is capable of it and who is just desperate for this funding can go. That's almost as important as the donation itself, right? Because you're now leaving more people to be able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So listen, last thing we usually work towards is, again, helping people answer this question of what can I do? So besides ordering who gives a crap products, which is always great. And now remind me again, right now, did you do tissues or are we at toilet paper, paper towels and trash bags?
We have tissues as well. Yes.
Nailed it. Perfect for children who are truly just never not sniffling. That's really exciting. So those are the four big ones. And are they available everywhere? Sort of. And I don't think, are they in brick and mortar? Are they in retail at all?
Yeah, so we predominantly sell online through our website, which is, whogivesacrap.org. So that's where we predominantly sell, but we are selling into retail as well. So we're in Whole Foods in the
Okay.
US. We're in some independent retail stores in the US as well. And we're in the grocery chains of Woolworths and Aldi in Australia, and also now in Waitrose in the UK. So
Ah,
we are
nice.
starting to have a more retail presence, and you don't have to buy a pack of 48 in retail either. They're in much smaller pack sizes. So it
Buy a pack of 48. I mean, you're going to use it. It's going to go bad? Come on, folks.
doesn't go
Uh,
bad.
yeah,
But
it does not go bad. I can attest to that. It will just get used. Awesome. That's super helpful. Is there any sort of template or model folks can use? And I don't know what capacity you're at or distribution, but to encourage local retail or a Target or whoever it might be, somewhere where people do buy these things and often sort of, I don't want to say on demand, but that's not everyone has a subscription to toilet paper like me as much as you all would like that. A lot of times people are going, oh, we're out of toilet paper. So how do they encourage their local stores or chains or whatever to carry? Who gives a crap?
you can always just ask those brands, right? Send them an email. Say, can you carry this brand of toilet paper or this brand of products? I think it does take a fair bit to get there, to get those brands to ask for it. But what we've found is that a lot of retailers are really trying to up their sustainability credentials,
Awesome.
and they're looking outside of what they do traditionally to be able to do that. So they're either trying to up their sustainability credentials because there's a regulation that's coming in inside that market, or they're just trying to be good corporate citizens, and either's fine by us. But
Sure.
what we're finding is that they're looking to brands like ourselves and other consumer brands, online brands that are doing good things in the marketplace from a sustainability perspective, or doing the right things, and looking to us for inspiration. So any encouragement that consumers can give to any of those brands to stock more sustainable products, not just ours, I'd suggest, send an email, send a letter, whatever it is, however you want to communicate, send a text message. I don't really care, to those companies, and ask them to, stock the products or stock the kind of sustainable goods that they're looking for.
Where would those, again, because we really try to not leave people hanging, where would then, again, let's say it's a semi-independent shop, whatever it might be, or a small chain, or very few of those exist anymore, but imagine there is. Who are they contacting once they've received 500 texts from our listeners about who gives a crap?
They can just come to our website and
Okay.
send us an email directly. We have a team of people who are actively interested in talking to those smaller groups. I always pronounce this wrong, but Erewhon, I believe, is a chain
Oh,
of
Jesus.
in
I lived in Los Angeles
LA.
for 15 years. It's that place. I mean, it makes Whole Foods look, yeah.
We're stocked in there, and we're happy to talk, with companies like, or retailers like that. They've currently got a crap smoothie on their menu at the moment. So we've just done a collaboration with them. So yeah, and apparently it's delicious. I'm not sure. I haven't tasted it.
I'm sure it is.
But,
I mean, everything
I'm
there's,
sure it's amazing.
you feel like a superhuman there, and then you realize you have no money left, but it might be worth it. It's full of beautiful people. It's great. What commercial industry, things like that, people's offices, people's workplaces, schools, stuff like that. Any sort of specific way to facilitate that besides just ordering online?
Yes. So once again, send us a message, come to our website. There's a link there to ask us a question, but we have commercial agreements in place. So we can supply office buildings, schools, commercial cleaning supplies at at a wholesale rate, rather than just buying from consumer website.
Now I'm going to go yell at my school board tomorrow and find out how much they spend on toilet paper. That's exciting. I think that's great because it gets kids, again, whatever the thing is, this is stuff that people literally touch and feel every day. I always tell people climate change, they're like, oh, I'm worried about the jet stream. I'm like, you can't do a lot about the jet stream, but it is the heat on your back. It's the trees in your neighborhood. It's the foods, it's the crops, it's the water, it's the toilet paper, right? And for people to, again, see your wrappers, I saw you got a national parks one going, it's all great. And it just makes people go, oh, what is this? It's not new in our house anymore. Again, it's been like 6 years, but it's a conversation starter, and that matters when we're talking to kids and stuff like that. It matters. Why should they cut down a tree for this stuff?
Absolutely. The more kids we can encourage to lead a more sustainable life, the better our future is going to be.
I love this. All right. Last question before I get you out of here. If you have 2 seconds, usually have a few to choose from here, but is there a book you've had time to read in the past year or so that could be truly anything, but if it's semi-sustainability related, great. Or it could be truly like me. It's dragons and shit like that. It could be anything.
There hasn't been a specific book that I've read, and I don't find a heap of time to read with just life and what's going on.
Truly.
But
It's in like my kid tried to get me to read some 900-page dragon book, and I was like, I'm interested, but you should know this is going to take me 3 years. Like I read in 6-minute increments at night.
most of my reading over the last few years is reading kids' bedtime stories. So
Well, give me one of
that's
those.
really
We
what
just
I've
had a
been
whole
reading.
conversation with somebody about Dragons Love Tacos. They're amazing. Your kids are a little older now, but what's the jam? Or what was it?
So I read a whole series of books called The Ranger's Apprentice. I think it was 12
Oh,
books
yeah.
in the series. The kids loved it. I loved it. I really enjoyed it. It was all fantasy
Mhm.
and, set in kind of Dark Ages times, knights and stuff.
Sure.
Really, really great series of books and a lot of fun to read.
Was a surprise to me the first time I saw that on my child's shelf is that it's not like a Ranger's Apprentice. Isn't Rangers the person's name?
No, he's actually an apprentice to a ranger.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I got that. Maybe
Yeah.
one of my children lied to me. That wouldn't be the first time. I thought it was like this. It was like Steve's Apprentice is what I thought it was. Gotcha. All right. Well, that goes to
Yeah.
show you.
The other one that I've liked, which is probably more on topic though, was a challenge for me, but was Donut Economics.
Great.
It really just puts into perspective and the thinking about how economics, works and plays within the sustainability space and how we can build a more long-term sustainable world.
No, that's a really good one. Again, toilet paper doesn't quite make it to the end, but we can get there. Yeah, I really do love that one. I really do love that one. I think it's really helped influence a lot of this movement towards more secondhand, third-hand goods, but also not just the consumption of them, hopefully the production of, especially again, textiles instead of the fast fashion stuff that falls apart. It's such a nightmare. Yeah, that's a great one. That's a great one. Anything else? What am I missing before I get you out of here?
The road to resolving climate issues and sustainability is not dead straight. It's going to have twists and turns in it. It's not black and white, and it's not perfect. So we've all got to continue working towards making progress to make this world a better place. We need to do that in our personal lives, in our businesses. We need to reach out to our, political representatives as well and to really push. We've got to keep pushing in all ways that we possibly can. So for everyone that's listening, everyone that's trying to do the right thing, keep it up. Keep trying to do the right thing and keep trying to make sustainability and climate a factor in, 90% of your daily decisions that you make if you can.
If you can get to 90%, let me know. That's impressive. It's admirable because again, like you said, there's no perfection here. That's not the way the system's built. Well, thank you. I really appreciate your time. Again, I have been interacting with your brand 2 to 3 times a day for about 6 years on my own, much less the rest of my house. A lot of crap smoothies in our life. So I really do appreciate it. This was a great one. That's it. You can read our critically acclaimed newsletter and get notified about new podcast conversations at importantnotimportant.com. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for giving a shit.